Hello and welcome to Makers.dev episode number 78. Chris, it's been almost 2 weeks. What happened? Our listeners are so angry.
You left. That's what happened.
Yes, it did. Yeah, it's my fault. I'm sorry.
You went on vacation. But it was good. It's the summer, so I had a bit of a vacation as well. I did some things, but yeah, my kids went to camps and I did various summer activities. So it was good on my end as well.
Cool. I'm of two minds of taking time off. The first is like, you only get one life and it's important to experience it. And at the same time, like, there's stuff I'm trying to get done and projects I'm trying to push forward. And I think I had a really good balance this trip of getting enough stuff done that I didn't feel listless while also being very present and getting to explore Greece and being fully present at the wedding. With jet lag, I had this really weird situation where I was waking up at like 3 a.m. and couldn't go back to bed. But then at 4 or 5 p.m., I would have to nap, and then I would nap for like 4 hours, and then I'd be up for another few hours. So within that, there were a lot of hours where I could like work on stuff. So that was nice. Had a small takeaway from Greece. Sarah booked us this cooking class in this remote village, and it was this house that had been in the family for like 5 generations. And the garden had been tended to by this woman's like great grandfather, and everything in the cooking class, she was like, "Oh yeah, this is goat's milk from our neighbor that we got, and like these are tomatoes and cucumbers that we got from that garden right there." And it was just so cool. And like the recipe we were making was the recipe that had been handed down through generations. And I was just struck with this feeling of like, man, I think this is how humans are supposed to live. Instead of like, man, the life that I'm living is so different than the life my parents lived. And completely different than the life my grandparents lived. And here this woman is like in the same place, using the same things, making the same food as her great-great-great-grandparents did. And there's something beautiful about that. And at the same time, I think if I were in an environment like that, I would go crazy. I seek novelty so much. But I do feel like I'm missing more of that groundedness and tradition, and like that I'd like to incorporate more of that in my life. That was my main takeaway from Greece.
Yeah, that's interesting. It might be because I live in Indiana, but I know more than one software developer who's quit to run a goat farm. Or I think one was chickens. One chicken, one was goats. Yeah, so I think people sometimes feel that pull back to going back to a simpler sort of existence. Yeah, but
I totally get it.
I would miss computers. So
yeah, same. I'm not ready for goat farming yet. Like, there's technology's still so cool. Like, we're getting VR glasses pretty soon, and that's going to be wild. And like Neuralink, and Teslas sure are cool. Yeah, but there is something like deeply spiritually grounding about like, the food you're eating is real food that came from over there, and like you grew it yourself. I don't want to completely change my life, but I would like to incorporate more of those elements into my life. We've been out for 2 weeks. I have a lot of things that I would like to talk to you about. You have one big thing that we can't talk about yet.
Yes.
And then some other things too. So what did you get up to over these last 2 weeks?
I got to inbox 0, which is important because I had a email in my inbox since the Slack App Store sent me the do these things before you can resubmit AcornChat. Yes. And I finished that today.
Yes.
So, yeah, I resubmitted to the Slack App Store, and so it's another 2-week wait, I think. But yeah, I finished all the things they told me to fix, which didn't take very long, but I had a 2-week break in there. So yes, I'm now done with that, and that's submitted. So that is exciting.
Fantastic.
And you were the one who forced me to do it, and so thank you.
I was. I'm so mean, and you do this for me all the time. A testament to co-working, right? Like, yeah. It's so easy from an external perspective to be like, okay, this is a thing you've been stuck on for a long time. It's not going to take you that much work. This would have like a meaningful impact on your life. Why don't you just do that first?
Yeah.
But I totally get that internally, like feeling that pull towards just like little tiny bits of resistance, and like, I'm sure in your head you had some idea of like, well, there's this unknown about this project and it might take a really long time. But if you just have someone there just like slightly nudging you of like, no, this is a thing that I think you want to do over the long term. That's sometimes what it takes to actually do it. I'm so happy for you. Well done. Good job.
Thanks.
I'm excited to be able to use this. I think we talked about this one of the last times we talked about AcornChat, but I think this is something that I'd like to integrate into my site specifically. So like I'm going to install Slack for this, but specifically what I'd like to be doing is experimenting with if there is live chat on my site, and I just have set up that like anytime I'm on my computer, I can be interrupted by users who are asking me sales sorts of questions. Does that meaningfully impact conversions? Because that would seem like a really good way to trade time for higher MRR, especially if I have a really low threshold for like, would you like to hop on a video call and I can walk you through how to do this or something. So that's going to be a marketing experiment I do. I'm excited to be able to install it. You think like around 2 weeks I'll be able to do it?
You can actually do it today if you want
Oh.
to. Yes. You can, if you just go directly to my site, you can actually do it without it being in the Slack App Store.
That's right. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. I don't know. Maybe I'll do that today then.
Yeah. Yeah.
Cool. For listeners, if you go to, is it acorn.chat?
AcornChat.com.
AcornChat.com.
Maybe I should buy acorn.chat also. I don't know if that...
I don't know if .chat is a TLD.
Me, I imagine, but yeah.
AcornChat.com. You can get live chat similar to, not Discord. What's the...
Similar to Intercom.
Intercom, that's right.
Similar to 0.01% of Intercom's features. Intercom does a ton. So, but, yeah.
If you just want the live chat features, this is and you use Slack, this is a much better way to do it. And easier to set up and way cheaper. I think Intercom can charge
cheaper.
easily like $1,000 a month if you get going on it.
Kind of big, yeah.
Cool. Congratulations. What else? Do you usually have AI competition stuff going on?
Yeah, so the patent competition finished up, and we got 24th place out of almost 2,000, which is good, but it's a silver medal, not a gold medal. So I was so confident, and then everyone started passing us, and we were like, there's some trick, and we don't know it, and there was a trick. Listeners, we did not figure out the trick. So that's okay. It's still a silver medal. I really wanted a gold one, but that's okay. I learned a lot, and it was a neat thing. So,
do you know what the trick is now? Can you talk about it?
Yes. Yeah, I can talk all about it now. So, again, one thing that's great about Kaggle is the winners like post their solutions, and so that's really neat to learn from. So, if you will remember what the competition is, there are patent applications that come in, and what the patent office wants to do is find basically like essentially synonym phrases. And so, like if you have the term like abating and active abating, those are like very similar. And they're similar in a certain context. And so the contexts are these like categories. So like agriculture, information technology, they're more fine grained than that. And so like certain word pairs are similar in certain contexts and not in other contexts. So that's the whole thing is you just need to predict if word or phrase pairs are similar or not from 0 to 1. Okay, so that's the setup. What we did is we compared the phrase pairs in a given context. What the winners figured out is that what the data actually looked like was a bunch of the first phrases are called anchors, and a lot of them were the same. So you'd have the word abating as an anchor like 20 times, and then you'd have like 20 different targets for different contexts, and you had to figure out if they were similar or not. So what the winning team did is they took all of the targets for the same anchor, and they also appended those to the word model. And so the idea is that the humans chose those targets for some reason, and the model was able to use the extra information found in that group of targets as information. And that might be a little confusing, but
you
that's
lost
the way,
me. You lost
that's the
me
way
about
AI works.
3 sentences ago.
Okay, sorry.
So I understand you have the goal of this competition is you're trying to given a word pair. So like abating and active abating, or abate and active abating. You're given those two things as input. Your output is how similar are they from 0 to 1. So those two within a context where those are exactly the same thing, you would output a score very close to 1.
Yep.
So very similar. Okay. And then you started talking about word targets.
Sorry, yeah. So the first phrase is called the anchor. So that's like what they called it. And the second phrase is called the target.
Okay.
So you can just think like phrase A and phrase B, basically.
Yes.
Anchor target.
Okay.
Yep. And the way the data was set up was there were several targets for every anchor. So there'd be like 20 or like the top 20 rows were all, the anchor was all abating.
Mm-hmm.
And that's a hard word to say, but it's because it was the top, so I always looked at the top of the, anyway, so abating. And then the targets were all different.
Mm-hmm.
And so the insight was that humans picked those targets to go with that anchor for some reason that the word model is able to figure out. So you can take all the targets for that particular anchor and stick it onto the end of the word model, or the end of the phrase you send into the word model.
Mm-hmm.
And the word model is able to figure something out about that.
Okay, so the training data that you got listed the two, you have two arguments going into this scoring function. And one of them is called the anchor. That's the first argument. The other one's called the target.
Yep.
So the very first one in the top row might be like abating and something else starting with an A.
Yeah.
So abating is the first argument. That's the anchor. And then the second argument is the target. So the insight that the winning teams had was those two phrases being in the testing data had information in itself. So you can learn from the fact that these two things are being tested.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Okay.
Which, to be clear, so I should back up. Our approach got a score of like a 0.86, and that's not important what that means, but it's out of 1, basically. Okay. And the winning score is like 0.87. So this is like just tiny little differences. And so we got like, world-class results ourselves. It's just the winners, which happens in most Kaggle competitions, the winners just found a little extra signal that we didn't find, which was the fact that these targets were actually picked by a human, and that means something. So
I see. Yeah. Okay, so they were just able to squeeze a little tiny bit more training data out of the training data, knowing that those terms were picked by humans.
Right. Yeah.
Okay, which seems kind of like gaming the system, which like this is sort of we talked before about like what a real world solution would look like versus a Kaggle solution. This feels much more like the code golfy type of thing of
exactly.
Okay.
Yeah. The other thing we did, we ensembled 10 different models together, but just one of our models could have gotten us like 98% of the way there. So in the real world, you would pick your best model and just use that, just one best model.
Yep.
In the Kaggle world, you ensemble 10 of them, and you have to have found this trick.
Yeah.
And that's what all the top 7 teams did. Yeah.
Interesting. This has got me thinking more about like how might a more useful Kaggle be structured? What if you were to design a Kaggle that wasn't that like looked more long term, or like that was more generically useful? What might that look like?
Yeah, so I have a kind of answer for that too, which is they're running a competition now, another one, and this is a sequel to the feedback competition, which was the essay competition that I talked about before. So this is using the same data but a different thing. It's basically actually scoring the data now, whereas before it was classifying it. And so that's just the main competition. But in parallel, they're running the separate track, which is an efficiency score. And so if you do well, but you also are super efficient, then there's extra different prizes for that. And so that's where if you have one really good model, that will score really well in the efficiency score, which is what you really care about in real world, use cases. But they're still running it in parallel with the regular track, which is where people will probably use big ensembles and stuff like that.
Sure.
So that's one way they're trying to do it, is run this efficiency sort of track in parallel.
I like that. I think another difference between Kaggle and real world that we talked about was like simplicity of the model. If it's easier to maintain, that's better in the real world but worse in Kaggle. Is there a way that you could reward simplicity in Kaggle competitions?
Yeah, one way they do that is so for these code competitions, they only give you like 9 hours of inference time. If they cut that to like 1 hour of inference time, then it'd have to be super simple. Like I mean, based on your data, but it would have to be 9 times less complex basically than whatever you submit. So yeah, that's one way you can do it, is by severely limiting the amount of inference time you have, which requires then simple models.
Okay, interesting.
Or you could do like you could limit like upload size, for example. Like these big models are like the one I was using was like 2.7 gigabytes times 4 folds times 10 models, roughly. So it was huge. It was like over 100 gigs. So if you limited that to like 1 gig, then it would have to be super, super simple.
Okay. Interesting. I'm curious to see how this evolves. Like, I'm reminded of in school, like when taking the SAT or ACT, I think when those tests were first introduced, there was this idea that like, oh, don't study for it because this is just testing like your innate intelligence or something. And then of course the first thing people do is try to figure out how to game the system and like take SAT and ACT prep courses. And now it is very much just about like how much have you practiced taking this test in particular.
Yep.
Like so you've kind of you're merely testing how good are you at taking this test, as opposed to the underlying thing that you're trying to test of like, well, how successful are you going to be in college or something, and that's
right.
That's much more difficult to test.
It
seems like a classic problem.
Yeah, in that case, it's actually kind of interesting because even though you're now testing how well you can take the test, that's kind of a skill you need for college anyway. And so then the question is, okay, is college actually a good thing for the real world? Because if you're just learning to take the tests in college too, then maybe that's actually not. So yeah, it's sort of it has a funny alignment there, I think.
Yeah, I'd love if I guess the closer you can get to what you're actually trying to get done,
right,
in testing is a better test. Like in a job interview, if you can test the person actually doing the job, that's a better test than like, can you do this whiteboard algorithm of okay, cool. Any other Kaggle things lined up? I think you said you were 2 or 3 golds away from getting Grandmaster.
Yeah, 3 still. I was hoping to be 2, but yeah, 3 still. Okay. I'm working on a couple of them now. The GPS one, which I haven't had as much time to work on as I want. I'm in like 100 and something's place now because someone submitted a thing. We talked about this last time, but it happened again, that someone submitted a notebook better than my score, and so I was like 20th again, and now I'm like 100 something. So now I have to update that again. I really just need to spend a bunch of time on it if I want to do well in that one. And then another one, which is interesting, which was a reinforcement learning one. So this is a game designed to be played by computers, and then you have to make a computer program that can play the game. And that's basically the prompt. You can do that with just hard-coded rules. So like you could create rules as a human, or you could use like reinforcement learning, which is like basically the ability for an AI, so a neural network, to get better by just playing the game. So it plays the game, it gets input about how it did, and then you have a training loop set up like that. So I worked on that a little bit. I found out I'm bad at reinforcement learning, which means I have to probably just do it more. But it was very interesting to get that working. So that was kind of neat. So yeah, I've been working on a couple of those.
Cool. I like the game one. You sent me one. You sent me that one, and I was looking at it, and it looks really cool. I like it. Sort of like a mini StarCraft, where there's little spaceships going out and collecting resources, and they can fight other things, and they can invest resources in reproducing, and it's a cool game. You said you were bad at reinforcement learning. What?
I tried it and it didn't work at all.
Okay.
So, yeah, like reinforcement learning, I know I have some experience with it in the past, and I know like there's a fine line between it not working at all and it suddenly just working, and you only get like figure out where the line is by doing a lot of testing and like making sure your problem is set up right and everything. And so it's really fiddly work. It's compared to just regular neural network stuff. It's also, what makes it hard is you don't know if it's working or not until your game is played, like thousands of games, which takes a long time because the simulator is, CPU bound. It's not like a GPU training set that you can use. It's just like a regular computer program. So it takes a long time to figure out if what you did even works or not. Yeah.
I'm realizing as you're explaining this, I thought I knew what reinforcement learning was, and I don't think I actually do. I think it has to do with like giving a computer a score of how well they're doing in the moment.
Yep. Yeah. So reinforcement learning is a broad term for many different techniques, but the idea is you have a neural network somewhere in there, and it makes actions in a space. So your space in this case is the game simulator, and then it gets a reward back, which might be immediate. So it might be like this. I did this turn and it reduced my ship count, and so that was bad, or it increased my ship count, so that's good. So that's like one thing. Or it might be you have to wait to the very end of the game to see who wins. And that's where it's really tricky, because like if you take 400 actions and then at the end of the game you won, how do you know like which, or at the end of the game you lost, say, how do you know which of those actions was bad? It may only be that one of those actions was the bad one and the rest were good. And so that there's lots of ways to deal with that, but that's the basic thing. So you take a bunch of actions, you get a reward, and then you try to do more of the actions that got you good rewards.
Gotcha. Okay. I could see that being useful for something like solving chess, but then you would run into the problem of like, what if you're in a position where you could sacrifice your queen to win the game?
Right.
Sacrificing the queen seems bad because losing the queen is bad, but that actually moves you closer towards winning the whole game, which is much more important than keeping your queen.
Yep. And this is actually exactly how DeepMind solved chess and Go. It was with reinforcement learning. Yep.
Cool. Can we just take a second? How, like, 20 years ago, if we were just casually talking about like, oh yeah, there's this, machine learning algorithm that just, it solved chess and Go, and it's the same one. 20 years ago, if you told me that, I would have been like, oh, so we have general artificial intelligence now.
Right. Yeah.
Oh, and also there's related networks that can drive cars. Like, that's where we are right now. That's the world we're living in, and that's wild. It's really cool. It feels strange that it is just normal that like, oh yeah, no human alive will ever in the future beat a computer at chess. Yeah, wild. Or Go. And like right now, humans are better at computers than driving cars, and the clock is ticking on that. Like there are already some circumstances where cars drive better. Let's relish while we can our driving superiority over computers. Man, the future's weird. Yep. Cool. I have several things that I would like to talk with you about.
Cool.
First, some just like life updates. So flew to Greece for a wedding, and then had a layover in London, and then came back to Boston, and we're here in Boston so that Sarah can take a class through Harvard in psychology for the next 2.5 weeks. Checked into the Airbnb here. It's a shared Airbnb. There's 2 other people living here. And on day 2 or 3 of being here, Sarah... Well, I woke up and I was like, I've got kind of a sore throat. And Sarah was like, oh no, I also have a sore throat. What if it's COVID? And I was like, oh, Sarah, we don't have COVID. We both have the vaccine, and I already had COVID. So I have like boosted immunity. But just in case, like, all right, let me look up how to get a COVID test, because, you have to go to this class in person, and they were talking about how they don't want people who have COVID to go and get it in person. So fine. So I looked up, and we don't have a car here. So I was like, going to this other place, and we'll have to get an Uber. And if we do have COVID, then I'd feel bad about getting in an Uber. So let me call my friend, who is a emergency physician locally, and see if he has any COVID tests on hand. And he did. So he drove over and gave me the COVID test, and he showed up in a mask. And I was like, oh, I should probably be wearing a mask too, like just in case.
Probably.
Yeah. And then Sarah came down and she already had a mask. I was like, Christian, where's your mask? And I was like, oh, sorry. And Sarah took the COVID test, and it was positive. And so we have COVID again. And I'm on day 4 of that, I think. This is so much more mild. My friend Luke thinks it's the Omicron variant, which I think is more virulent, but less, like, your symptoms aren't as bad. So the first time I had it, like, I couldn't get out of bed for like 2 days. And I lost my sense of smell, and it was like a really, really bad flu. And this one's like a mild cold. Like, I was kind of achy for the first 2 days. I had a headache for the first 2 days. But like the second day I went on a 3-hour hike, and it was just like a little more strenuous than it usually was. Socially distanced and wearing a mask, and very safe and stuff. And on day 4, like, I'm a little sniffly and I have a little cough. But like still getting work done, still exercising, and so it's much more chill than the first one was. But I I guess I'm collecting all of the variants of COVID now. That's yes. So that's the first little thing.
Well, that's a bummer.
COVID. Yeah. We had to miss out on some stuff that we had planned. Oh, there's a place in Boston called Boda Board. It's this like speed run escape room that I went to last time I went to visit my friend Luke up here. So much fun. You have 2 hours, and they have like 30 different escape rooms, and they're all time-based. So you just like, you run through them, and as soon as you make a mistake, you have to leave the room. So you're just like grinding through these rooms over and over. And in 2 hours, most people get like 4 of them done or something. But oh my God, it was like the most fun I'd ever had. So we were planning on doing that, but then I got COVID. I can't do it. So it's possible that we'll start testing negative tomorrow, especially with how like symptoms have been going. So I'm really hoping that happens before the trip is over, so we can go there. But I'd be very sad We also had to cancel that. Your family, I think, still like no one has actually gotten COVID. You've had a few scares of things, but
as far as we know, yeah. I mean, we've been sick, but we've tested and it's been negative. So it either wasn't or we tested negative, which is something that I guess happens sometimes. So yeah, so far so good.
I'm envious of that, and also personally, anecdotally, like COVID's not that bad. I don't know if I'm relatively healthy.
Well, it's not that bad unless it is. Like anyone with long COVID will tell you, like yeah. So that's mostly what I'm scared of now. Is like we'll say relatively healthy, and getting long COVID scares me. So
yeah. I think for Omicron, the rates of long COVID are higher, and long COVID is still something that's not very well understood.
Right.
Yeah, so hopefully I don't get that. I don't think I felt like just sort of vaguely lethargic for the couple of weeks after I had it the first time, but
yeah,
I think I'm already feeling better than I did like several weeks after having it the first time. So I'm feeling optimistic, and yeah, it's not as bad as it was the first time. Cool, that was the first thing. Second two things are two books that I read while traveling that I would love to talk with you about. The first one is a book that just came out, Building a Second Brain by Tiago Forte, who for several years has run an online class of the same name. Are you familiar with Building a Second Brain or Tiago Forte?
I might follow him on Twitter. I've seen this on Twitter, and so I at least follow people who like his stuff because it seems very interesting. It's basically, tell me if I'm wrong, it's like how to get everything in your brain out into a place where you can then search for it easily later. Is that right?
Yep.
Okay.
That's what it's about. If I could phrase that differently, it's a book about it's a system of knowledge asset management. So like systematizing from the moment when you have an idea to the moment when you have some sort of a creative output at the end of it, streamlining that whole process, making sure that like you can capture it no matter where it comes from, making sure that that information gets organized in a way that's low friction and also useful and delivered to you when you need it. And then like the things that you do with those notes once you have them to be able to restructure them into some sort of a creative output of like a song or a book or something else, an article. There's a quote from the book that I keep coming back to of he talks about how Taylor Swift has a very similar system for writing her songs. She has several documentaries about her songwriting process, and she carries her phone with her all the time, and she's constantly writing notes of just ideas that pop into her head. And in one of the documentaries, she talks about how she had this realization after a breakup that there's really only two outcomes for being in a relationship. Either it lasts forever and you guys are really happy and get married and then die together, or it explodes. At the time, the realization she had was like, it's kind of strange that those are only two choices. And then in the song Blank Space, one of the lyrics is, so it's going to be forever or it's going to go down in flames. And that's just like one little tidbit of a lyric that hearing that and thinking about it now, it like gives me chills of like, what a cool little lyric to have in this song. That's, one of 30 ideas in this song. But if you just do that 30 times and you have all these little snippets of ideas and you can pull them all together, that's how you write the song. That now I checked on YouTube. I think it has something like 3 billion views. That's nuts.
Yeah.
That like it's not her process in doing that is just collecting things a little bit better and like having a system of being able to remix them. Jerry Seinfeld has a very similar system, but it's got me in this mind frame of rethinking all of my digital knowledge management stuff, from collection to organization to actually producing things, and that has me revitalizing a few of these like knowledge management processes that I've been thinking about. Question for you is like general thoughts about the digital knowledge management thing, and also I'd love to hear about your process of that. Like when you have an idea or when you hear a reference from someone, what happens to that information? Where do you capture it, and where does it go from there?
Yeah. So several thoughts. The first is like one of the reasons Taylor Swift is so popular, I guess, is one, she has pop music, and so like that is going to make her more popular, like just the style of her music, but also like she's really authentic. Like she writes her own lyrics, right? And she pulls from real experience and stuff. And so I think there's a lesson there that we can learn too. Like if we want, like the more authentic we are, in SaaS, like we're trying to be, or just in general, like the more popularity is not a great thing to strive for, I think. But the more, I don't know, the more success you'll have, right? The more authentic you are. So anyway, that's an interesting takeaway from that. My process. So I use pen and paper a lot, actually. I like that. And then for things I want to last longer than pen and paper, I have this, so I basically go everywhere with one of these composition notebook things and write down a lot of stuff in that. And then I move it into the Notes app. And I do that because it syncs to my phone. And so that, like, if I'm at a conference or something, I can use my phone to write a note in the Notes app, and that syncs back to my computer. And that's it. Like, I don't, I have tried more complicated things before, but like basically having a big giant note where I keep most of my stuff is that's what I do. Yeah, I guess I'm optimizing for ease of input, and then I can always search it later. Yeah, that's what I do.
I love the simplicity of that. Did I hear you correctly that it's everything eventually flows into a single note in the Notes app?
Well, so yes, but I have 30 something notes for different, like, I tend to break them up by project. So I have a note where I enter everything, and then a lot of stuff just stays in that note. So that note is like, if I print it out, it'd be like 100 pages long by now. But I will take things from that and paste them into the other notes, which are specifically for the different either areas of my life or projects. So like I have one for the house and one for all the different SASs I have, and one for like course ideas and stuff. So so that makes it a little easier to go find things. Yeah.
Cool. I like the simplicity of that. My base system is more complicated than that, and I think reading this book has gotten me more in the mind frame of pulling towards the simplicity. I would encourage you, and like anyone listening to this, that Tiago makes this argument that like basically everyone can benefit from this because 60% of the workforce is some sort of a knowledge worker, where the majority of your assets are in your knowledge. And so if you're investing in a system to be able to better manage your knowledge, that has all these untold benefits of you can compound the value of that, and you're going to be working so much faster. He has the statistic of the number of hours people spend just looking for information per day. And so if you're systematizing that, okay, that's speeding up the retrieval and the writing process. So I'd encourage you to read it because like if you get a single tip from this of just a little tweak of, I can categorize these things in this slightly different way, and that's going to speed it up a little bit more. A single tip will, easily pay for the energy that you invested in reading the book and stuff.
Yeah. So I'll say I've done that a little bit, kind of. Okay. So when I will do work for clients, I don't want to keep that in a Notes app that syncs like to my phone and stuff. So I keep those in separate text files. So like for my longest client, I had this text file, and it was a really long file. But for every section, I would have a header with a unique word that I knew was like not anywhere else in that document. So like every time I wanted to deploy, for example, for this one client, I would open up its notes.txt, which is on my desktop, and I would search for deploy or pound deploy, which was the header name, and then I'd go right to the deploy thing, which is the 10 steps or whatever that I had to do before I deployed. And so that's sort of how I organize that, which is so just super simple. Find, and all my headers were unique, and so that's how I did that.
That's a really good system. I have something similar with, but I have just like one giant folder with a bunch of text files in it that I open up with Sublime. And so I have like instructions to myself for doing things like, deploying a Rails app on Doku or something. So I can just Command P in Sublime and search for deploy Doku, and it finds that file, and then I'm able to jump straight to it. I think my argument for getting you to read this book would be like, there's probably going to be 5 other things like that are going to help benefit this. And even if you don't get anything from the book, which I think you will, it's a very well-written book, and like Forte's thought a lot about this problem, merely by putting you in the headspace of like this metacognition of thinking about how you're storing digital things is going to have compounding benefits, because I love the way he frames how valuable this thing is. It really is like a second brain, and really justifies a big investment of time and energy into making sure that it's streamlined and that it's maximized for like being able to get value back out of it.
Does he talk about file storage at all? Because that's where I have a huge problem. I think like my file storage is junk. Like it's like they're everywhere. It's bad. Did he talk about that at all?
He mentions so the book is like a framework of how he recommends treating digital information, and then he talks about how you can you can apply the framework in any system. Like you could implement the framework in an email client, you could implement the framework in Evernote. And he says specifically about files that if they're large files that doesn't belong in like your notes app. But I haven't finished the book yet. I assume his recommendation would be follow a similar philosophy of this framework of like have a spot for an archive, have a spot for files that are in active projects. That's my answer. He hasn't talked directly about it yet, and I think the answer would be like take the framework and apply it to files.
Okay, cool. Yeah, maybe I should check it out.
Cool. Something I just want to mention is like I've realized in reading this book that I have a lot of personal projects related to knowledge management that now in reading this book have sort of resurfaced. So like my Zettelkasten system of being able to do automatic backlinks and my Treebook system of being able to read books. That's the system I'm using to read through this book and really just like extract everything out of it. And my flashcard system of being able to like do spaced repetition so that I remember facts for a long time. And my long-term goal setting system so I can like track what my goals are longitudinally. And my Briar score so that I can like keep track of how well I'm doing at making predictions. I feel like it's a whole category of my work life, like stuff that I'm thinking about that really does justify putting a lot of time into, because if like with a good note-taking system, that really is expanding the thoughts that I'm able to have. And if I can cross-link little drips of thoughts of like, 6 years ago, I had this thought that relationships can only end in one of two ways. And now here I am writing this song and I'm missing a lyric in this one spot. If I can successfully deliver that thought from 6 years ago to right when I need it, I'm like a better person and capable of better, more complicated output. So I'm in the mind frame of investing more in those systems and getting more of that sort of output.
I'll say as a meta point, I love how he started this saying that goat farming is how we should live, and then we are now talking about building a second digital brain.
Yes. Yeah, like I don't know what my ideal life would look like. Like maybe I'm on a farm, but the farm has like fiber internet, and I have and then like while I'm milking the goats, I have an Apple Watch on that like while I have some insight into a better way to structure Firebase security rules, I can just turn my wrist over and capture that thought and then keep milking the goat. And then I go back in and I have like my whole battle station of my fancy Apple Studio monitor, and I do that. But then I go on a nice walk or something. Maybe that's that is it's two very different things. Yeah. Anyway, I don't claim to be a consistent person.
Sure.
I have some conflicting desires. There's a second book I read that I'm not going to spend as much time on this one, but I thought it was really interesting. It's called On Looking, and the author goes on a walk around her block with the intention of writing down everything she sees. And so it's trash day, and she's walking around, and she notices like, there are 3 trash bags over here, and some of the Q-tips have overflowed, and that's gross. And I can hear the garbage trucks going by, and I see a woman with her dog, and round the block, and the temperature is about this high, and the sky looks this way, and she gets back, and she has this whole page of like 2 pages of notes of all the things she saw. She's like, all right, I feel like I saw pretty much everything. And then the rest of the book is her interviewing a dozen different people from different backgrounds and asking them what they see, and they all see completely different things, and she didn't see any of them. Mm-hmm. It's things like she interviews an entomologist who's like, look at this leaf, and the pattern of how this leaf was eaten out. That means it was this type of bug that laid its larva here, and that's what that means about this type of bug, and it moved in this direction, and here's what that means. And see this other tree, it doesn't have nearly as many of its leaves eaten. That means this tree is not indigenous to this area because it doesn't have as many pests that are attuned to be able to eat that. And then she talks to a geologist, and the geologist is like, look at all the rock used in this building, and like you can see this ancient worm path in this rock, and this rock was mined in this way using this technique that's 60 years old, which means it came from this specific query in this part of the US, and that's right next to this other query that was in Greece, and that's weird. And then she talks to like, she brings her son out, who's like a 1.5-year-old, and her son is noticing all the shapes, and like her son is anthropomorphizing. Yeah, exactly. And she's like, I had no idea there were so many circles in this space. And he looks at these pipes coming out of the ground, and he's treating them as if they're animals. And she's like, wow, he like hasn't learned that those aren't animals yet. But who's to say that that's not the correct way to treat them? Sound designer she talks to, and the sound designer is like hearing this symphony of sounds that he can be using in films and commercials and things, from all the different soundscapes. She talks to a blind person. The blind person is able to like sense the pressure of things and sense when she's under an awning because of the way that the sound changes. And I was reading this on the flight to Greece, and I landed and was just like, oh my God, there's just so much to look at. Like, there are so many layers to reality. And in thinking more about it, like, I think there's an infinite number of layers. I think there are infinite perspectives. And I was chewing on that for a while of like, could there really be infinite? Like, you know, if you had two sound designers, they'd like, okay, they would probably see slightly different things, but they would still be seeing roughly the same thing. But I do think it's infinite, because if you had 1,000 sound designers, I think they would all, like, no two of them would tell you that they were perceiving the exact same thing. In the same way that, like, if you took all of the cameras in the world and took a picture of the exact same thing, no two of those pictures would be the same. Those would all, even if you took them like from exactly the same perspective, from the same place, they would all be slightly different resolutions. They would all capture the pictures in different pixels in a different way. And so I feel like really good books change how I see reality. And this book really did that for me. Like, looking out the window now, I can focus on it at like 10 different layers of detail. Of like, you know, there's some rain droplets on the window. And that's really interesting, and might be, you know, if I knew more about weather, I might be able to tell you something about the pattern of raindrops and what that meant about the weather. But also I can look at the window and like the type of window that is, and that probably tells me that I'm in a particular part of North America, and like the way it was installed. And I can look through the window at the tree, and like if I knew more about trees and botany, I could tell you more about that. But man, I feel like reading this book has made reality more interesting to me, and that feels really cool. That was the second book I wanted to tell you about.
What's the name of that book again?
On Looking,
yeah, that's cool. That brought up a lot of thoughts. One is like, yeah, totally. Like, people see it. Like, it might not be infinite, but there's at least more than 8 billion different viewpoints, which is the number of people in the world. And so, yeah, everyone can see it differently, which is crazy. I often think, or sometimes think about, so like I've spent the last, 14 years, 8 hours a day thinking about computers. And so when I see something, from a tech perspective, like I understand it in a very particular way. There are people like that for everything. Yeah, like you said, for rocks, for leaves, for whatever. Like, there are people with 40 years of experience just looking at leaves. Yep. And that's crazy to think about. Like, that like that depth of knowledge is it's not like it's cool. Yeah, so that's neat. I think I might have to read that one. That's cool. And it's great to go to read that right before a trip, because then you're like on the trip. First of all, it's a new place, and now you're like a new way to see a new place. And so that's double cool. Maybe it's too overwhelming. I don't know. But, yeah.
I was just like, even waiting in line at customs, I was just like, wow, this is amazing. I can be looking at, the gait of people. One of the people interviewed in this book was a physician who was able to look at just the way someone was walking. He was able to say like, oh, look, they're hunched over in this way and they're slightly limping on the right foot, and that means they probably have this sort of injury to this vertebrae in their spine. Like, it's if you're ever bored, you're just not paying attention enough, like, because there's so much going on all the time. It's fascinating. There was one more thought I wanted to say on that, and I don't remember what it was now. In the same way that you and I have spent so much time on computers, that there's someone for like everything that a person could be interested in that has spent an equal amount of time. It's made people much more interesting to me of having conversations with them, because like the old woman who was teaching us how to cook traditional Greek food, like, man, talking to her is my opportunity to see the world through her lens, and she is living in a different world than me. Like, she perceives different things. When I walk up to her, she was probably thinking like, here's like a city boy from the US and he doesn't know anything about traditional Greek culture and what it means to live. I'll never forget, at the end of that dinner, I was just like glowing, and we just had like the homemade wine and this whole meal that we just made. And I was like, thank you so much. This was great. And give her a hug. And she gave me a hug and she said, I hope you have a nice life. And I just felt like this warmth in my heart. I'm like, oh my God, this woman hopes I have a nice life. It felt like she like knew something about living that I like didn't fully understand yet. So that's gotten me more excited in having conversations with people of like trying to see more of reality through their perspective and trying to figure out like, oh, you're an entomologist. Tell me what you see. Like, what am I blind to right now that is jumping out to you as really interesting. So it's like a new way that I've been framing conversations with meeting people. That's all I have on that. Anything else on Lucky?
Just that sometimes I actually kind of get depressed that I'll never like experience those things. Like there's like infinite amount of experience you can have, and it's like I have this one life, right? And I'm using it to learn about computers, which is cool, but I'll never learn about bugs the same way. Like a what do you call a bug person? A bug person would, like I don't know. And there's I could do that for anything. So I don't know. I guess that's why we have hobbies. We can get a glimpse into those worlds. But.
Yeah, man, I feel that. It does feel limiting, and at the same time feels sort of exciting. Of like, there's limitless potential. If I wanted to chuck my computer in the river and just learn a bunch about bugs, like, I guess I would need my computer. That would be an effective way to learn about bugs. Still, but
there's a library. You go to the library.
I could also go to the library, or like intern with an entomologist or something, or a bug person. It from more of a. Like, I find myself when I'm feeling more depressed or like more, if there's something going on in my life, or like if I'm sleep deprived, I tend to look at this sort of problem as like limiting and scarcity, that like, how terrible is it that I can't have all the things? But then if I'm feeling in a better mood, it feels much more like it's exciting that there's this limitless potential. And it's the same external environment. I think it's just like what my mood is in the moment. Like when I go to the Cheesecake Factory and I look at the menu and it's like 60 pages long. Sometimes I go there and I'm like, wow, 60 pages of stuff. How exciting. I could order anything. And then sometimes I go to the Cheesecake Factory and I'm like, oh God, like what if I order the wrong thing? Or what if there could have been a better thing? Like the menu hasn't changed. It's just my perception of the menu has changed, based on if I'm feeling positive or negative, just about life in general.
It's like a growth mindset kind of thing.
Yeah.
Like
Carol Dweck. Yeah. Cool. Two more things I would love to talk to you about. Even though I was traveling and didn't open up the FileInbox code base for this entire last 2 weeks, I still got stuff done because I had a call with Rachel before I left, and I had a call with Rachel a few days ago. And before I left, I was like, hey, a thing I'd like to do that, by the way, I'm very scared of doing is cold calling businesses in these categories local to Dallas. Can you please put together a spreadsheet of 10 people from each of these verticals so that I can call them? Or I think I said 20 people from these 3 verticals. And she said, yes, of course. I'm your personal assistant, and you pay me to do things that you told me to do. And I was like, wow, that's still surprising to me, but amazing.
Right.
And after having like a week and a half of vacation, during which I was not worried about customer support email at all because she handled it like, So part of the building a second brain stuff that I was running through was I re-looked at all of my goals. I go through maybe once every 6 or 12 months. I just write out what my goals are and things that I want. And consistently from like 2014 when I started doing this, once a year I would write down like, I really want a personal assistant. That would just be great. And related to that, I would really love to solve customer support emails. And now here I am. I've done it, past Christian. We've achieved it. And it's great. It's even better than we thought it would be. So that felt really cool. And then having the call with her, she was like, by the way, that thing you told me to do, I did it. And I was like, amazing. I tell you to do something, then you do it. This is so cool. So I have now sitting for me in Notion this beautiful spreadsheet of 60 local businesses with a phone number and an email that I can just go down. Don't even have to think about it. Just go down and cold call them. And I'm terrified. And I'm going to do it. And I don't know when I'm going to do it, but I would like for my... Okay, this is a good question for you.
Yeah.
Because you know very well like the stage of development that I'm in FileInbox. You asked me the question a couple weeks ago, like, is the new version better than the old version yet? And I was embarrassed to say no. I'm like one feature away from it being better though, which is building this Dropbox and Google Drive integration. And then I could just start shuffling people over, and I'll have reached my goal of feeling unencumbered with the tech debt, and also with Rachel doing customer support emails, that like I will genuinely feel like I can just put 2 feet in marketing and just keep doing that. How would you be thinking about, like for my work tomorrow, should I be racing as fast as I can to finishing this Dropbox and Google Drive integration, or should I be starting right away? Like should I do half and half, where I do half my time doing development and half my time doing marketing? Should I be working twice as much? How would you be framing that?
This is what I would do. You have a spreadsheet that is scary to you.
Yes.
I would spend the first POM tomorrow, which I'm going to be on the call with you for, so
You sure
I
will.
can force you to do this. Calling the first one. Just
Okay.
call one.
Okay.
Call one.
Okay.
Because one is easy, right?
Yep.
I mean, it's scary, but it's easy.
Yep.
It's just one.
Yep.
And then you've broken the seal.
Yep.
Your job is not to close them. Your job is just to talk to them.
Yes.
That's the whole point. And that will, I think, completely reframe how you're thinking about everything. Once you have done one, you will know how hard it was. You'll know how easy it was. You'll know what they said. You'll know, like, it'll just totally change how you're thinking about it. So before you make any plans, I would call one. That's what I'd do.
That is so reasonable and a really good suggestion. Okay, tomorrow I'm going to call one person from the list.
Great.
And I'm just going to do a deploy empathy style interview, just asking them, hey, I'm a local software developer. Do you have 10 or 15 minutes for me to ask you a few questions about the software you're using? I'm not trying to sell you anything. I just want to hear you complain about software you like or don't like.
Yep.
Yeah. And if I got that call, like, consistently, people I've talked to, like, software is weird, right? Because everyone depends on it, but it's really it's like cars. Like, no one knows how a car works, but everyone needs a mechanic. And I feel like if someone called me and was like, "Hey, do you want to complain about things you don't like about your car?" I'd be like, "Of course, I'd love to." No one's listened to me when I try to complain about it.
Just like we just said, like, they've spent 20 years in their business, right? Or whatever.
Yeah.
You've spent 10 years with computers.
Yeah.
Of course they want to talk to you about computers because they don't know computers. They know their business.
Yeah.
And so,
Yeah,
if you are able to talk to them about computers, great.
Cool.
So, yeah.
Cool. Okay. Yeah. Okay. This is becoming less scary. Whew, we're going to do it. It's fine. 2 other things in that category. I am looking for more things for Rachel to be doing. And she mentioned that through Squared Away, which is the consulting agency that I hired her through, they offer training in QuickBooks. And I was like, oh, actually, yeah, categorizing QuickBooks would be a great thing for you to do. So that's going to be another thing that I push off to her. And then as a snapshot, I'm currently at 4,600 MRR for FileInbox. That's something I'd like to be talking about every episode, just like checking in. That's so we can track over time, like where MRR goes. That's all for FileInbox. Anything else?
If I remember right, you wanted to get that to 20K in 12 months. Is that right?
That's correct. And I think we're already a month into that because I went on vacation immediately after. Yep.
All right. Good.
Yeah.
Good to check in. Yep.
I was talking with a friend about this, and I was like, I'd like to get to 20K. And he was like, "What are you at now?" And I was like, "I think like 4.5." And he was like, "Okay, so if my calculations are correct, all you need to do is earn like 4.2 times more." And I was like, "Okay, calm down. That's not helpful at all." Yes. Okay, last thing. I had a few more hours that I spent towards the 2 consulting projects I was doing, the one for Brian, doing the face following, and the one for Trig, doing something mysterious involving text messages. On Trig's app, I spent another 3 hours during these weird hours while I was in Greece, where I was up at like 4 in the morning while still jet lagged. So the total amount that I worked on that, so the total amount I charged him was $2,412. Before doing this extra work, I had made $183 an hour. Now with this extra work, that went down to $150 an hour. Still something I'm totally comfortable with. This was following your advice of like, if it's a small change, just do it for free. You don't need to renegotiate or something. And I'm happy I did that because it was sort of in scope. And yeah, so I'm still feeling good about that. And then the face following thing for Brian, I had previously spent 9 hours and 30 minutes, and that was the job that I did for $6,969.69.
Yep.
And so the previous hourly rate was $536.13 an hour, which felt obscene. It felt like too much money. And I spent another. Oh, and at the time, hold on. That would have been if I had spent 13 hours on it, which was like my estimate of how much I thought it would be to finish it up. To date, I've spent 19 hours on it, which is more than 13, and it's not quite done. I need to talk with him though about ironing out like exactly how he wants it. There's like a functional thing, but it's not very efficient, so, and I can cut corners in different ways, and I don't quite know which corners to cut. So currently, it's still not done. But my hourly rate went from $536 to $367, which is a lot less, but feels much less obscene. That like I feel like I'm actually earning the money.
Yeah.
So that's my update on consulting jobs.
Right.
Still making a lot of money. I like the idea of like making more immediate money, and I would so much rather be earning higher MRR.
Yeah.
But it is nice to know that I can do that. It helps me feel less scarce about money when I get an email that like a customer canceled and my MRR went down by like $100 a month.
Right.
It's nice to know that like, okay, well, I can just go and make a few $1,000s from a project that doesn't take me that much time.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, that's kind of what we expected with, fixed bid projects. You have to do some follow-up work and that'll drop your MRR. With the face following one though, like that's building skills and building IP that you can use for future projects. So that's really cool. Even the trig one is like, you'll be able to use those skills in the future. So like, it's not, what really hurts is when you have a giant, a giant project that goes over by like double, and then you're like, 20K in the hole or something. Which has happened to me. So, I think those are, good updates. Good.
Cool. One tiny thing I wanted to mention is that I'm switching back to iOS. I think you've been on iOS for a while. I started on iOS, and then I've been on Android for the last few years. I think I'm ready to switch back to iOS. How do you like iOS? Have you always been on iOS? Have you tried Android?
Yeah, so when I first got a smartphone, Android was terrible, I think. And so I got an iOS phone, and I've been on it since then. My wife's on it. So we have iPads, which are on it. Makes it very nice and I have a Mac, right? So it makes it very nice. Like my Notes app syncs between them seamlessly and everything. So yeah, I like it fine, because I've never known anything different. At the beginning, I don't know what it's like now, but you could like customize everything about an Android phone, which seems nice. But I remember doing that with like Ubuntu and wasting tons of time customizing stuff that doesn't matter. And so like I'm like iOS just does it for you, whatever. Like I don't know. So I treat my iPhone like I've also deleted a ton of stuff from it. Like my homepage is only 2 rows of apps now, and so I treat my phone more like a I don't know, less like an appliance and more like a thing that only lets me get the stuff done that I need done, and then for everything else to go to my computer. So I do much less on my computer, or on my phone. Like it's way more important to me about the camera quality, for example, than anything else, because like I take pictures of my kids with my phone, right? So the camera has to be great. I like it.
Cool. That makes a lot of sense to me. I switched to Android for the customization, and I'm not currently, and haven't in a long time, been using any of that customization ability. So and I was on a call with someone the other day, and they were like, oh, let's trade numbers, and he texted me and he was like, oh, you're not on iPhone. And I was like, that's correct, I'm on Android. And he was like, why? And I was like, huh, why? That's a good question. That's not something I've thought about in a while. And then Sarah's phone broke while we were in Greece, which that was spicy. We had to now we're just relying on one phone, but we were able to get through just fine. And we were looking at different phones to get, and I had been thinking about switching to iOS, and so she's now switched over, and she got an Apple Watch and an iPhone, and my gosh, they just work so well together. You set an alarm on one, and then it goes off on both of them, and then you just miss it on one, and it immediately goes off on the other one, and all the apps have Apple Watch apps, and it's just so good. You can trade off calls, and the ecosystem is just so well tuned. Meanwhile, on Android, like, gosh, there have been like a dozen little stupid things where I'm like, this is a phone made by Google, and they made the operating system. They're like, this is a stupid bug. Why is it? This shouldn't be happening right now. Little stupid things in the UI and ways that different things are working, and like apps aren't as well optimized because when you're an app developer for Android, you got to support like 1,000 different phones. But if you're making an iOS app, it's like 6 phones or like 90%, 95% of what the users are going to be on.
I think it's like iOS, if you follow the mainstream, like if you don't customize very much and you like, then it's great. As soon as you try to like customize stuff or sync stuff in a slightly different way or something, then it breaks horribly. And that's what Android's really good at. But yeah, if you just want to do like what everybody else is doing or use your phone super simply, kind of like I am trying to do, then iOS is great. Yeah.
And I think your attitude towards a phone of just using it as to get specific tasks done. You're trying to take pictures, you're trying to take notes, 3 other things. That's a healthy way to use phones. I was in this campus at my alma mater. It was this presentation that this woman was giving where she was talking about digital addiction and like mental health as it relates to social media. And she had everyone in the room pull up their usage statistics on social media to see like, okay, how many hours today so far, and this was happening at like 1 p.m., have you spent on Instagram and Facebook and whatever else they were using? And I looked at it and it was like, oh, like 5 minutes. And everyone else in the room was like 3 hours. And I was like, 3 hours? What is this your job? What are you doing? That's not healthy. That's like, this is going to be the akin to smoking for this generation. If you're using your phone like that, it's an addiction. And I have had moments of my life where I've slipped into that. And I want to be consciously pulling myself back towards like a phone is for getting things done, and I need to be conscious about if the things I'm doing on a phone are things that I actually want to be doing.
We should all be goat farmers. I think that's the key takeaway.
Yeah, goat farmers with like an electronic notebook and a way to call people and a way to Google things and look at YouTube videos, but not like I don't want YouTube to suggest things to me. I want to be able to ask YouTube, can you teach me how to milk a goat a little bit better? Right. And I want them to show me videos about that and then stop and nothing else. I don't care about what Kylie Jenner's up to. I don't want to know about terrible things happening in the world unless like, I don't know, maybe that's part of my social responsibility. If there's a war going on, I want to know about the war. If there's maybe a place I can send some money, I guess I would like to know that. Even then though, maybe I just want to like give some money to someone else who's going to decide where that's going to go.
It's tricky.
Yeah. I just want my device to serve me instead of having other people steal my attention. Cool. We covered everything I wanted to cover. Anything else?
Nope. That's it.
Then that's all I got.
That's all I got too.
Then I will see you next week. Goodbye.